We're back on the Pete the Planner Show. For some reason today, I've decided to just get the experts on the phone. Not that I'm not an expert, I know a thing or two, but why not have the best possible answer? Not just a really good answer, but the best possible answer. I had a student loan question, and I'd been texting with my friend Phil Schumann, who's the director of financial literacy at Indiana University earlier in the day. And I was like, hey, bruh, you want to be on the show? And he's like, sure. And I was like, okay, let's see if we can make it happen. He joins me now. Phil, welcome back to the show.
Hey there. Always a pleasure to be on.
That didn't seem sincere. All right, Phil. I love this question. I sent it to you because I wanted you to be able to see it. I'm going to read it to you now. And it says, good afternoon, Pete, but I'm going to put, and Phil. Are you comfortable with that?
That's totally fine.
Okay. Good afternoon, Pete and Phil. My grandma has encouraged me to write you an email to maybe help out on a financial situation. First of all, I would just like to point out, Phil, that I'm really big with grandmas.
Like, you personally are good with grandmas? Because so am I. For some reason, they love me.
I feel like grandmas love us. They don't find us to be like predatory in nature or weird. Maybe they like weird. I don't know.
I don't know if they like weird or not. What I know is that growing up, my grandma always made me feel like Superman.
Yeah.
Because anytime I would lift up a recycling bin full of aluminum cans, she'd be so impressed.
You know, first of all, that is a very sweet story that I almost teared up because I like thinking of grandmas. But it also shows how young you are because you had a recycling bin with your grandma when you were a kid. So you just dated yourself.
I'm not that much younger than you.
I currently am making monthly payments to Navient for my school loans. That monthly payment is based off my income each year. What do we call that, Phil? IBR.
Your income?
Yeah, well, income-based repayments, IBR.
Yeah.
Yeah, which is different than IBS. With that being said, the monthly payment is not covering the interest, so I've been making payments for a few years, yet my student loan amount keeps increasing as there isn't enough money being applied to the interest, yet it's the most amount she can afford to pay with her other living expenses. When she talks to her representative at Navient, which you cannot spell Navient without the word what, Phil? Naive, that's right.
Navi?
No, it's naive.
Okay.
They pretty much tell me only option is to put them into forbearance, but I don't want to do that. What I don't understand is I'm a hard working class woman that wants to pay back the money I borrowed for my education, but it seems like they're making it impossible. She wants to know what her options are and how to make this better. Appreciate any advice you can provide, and thank you for your time. Phil, let's first start by defining forbearance. If they said, well, your option, if you don't feel like you can make payments, is to go into forbearance, why is that weird advice? Because that's weird advice.
Yeah, I mean, if you are putting something into forbearance, basically you're not making a payment on the loan. The student loan company knows this, but that doesn't mean that the loan doesn't stop accumulating interest. So really, all it's doing is it's just taking your financial hole and just digging it deeper for you while you're not responsible for anything at that time. But at some point, you're going to have to get out of it, and in order to do it, you're going to have to pay back on the loans, which at that point, it's going to be worth a heck of a lot more.
We need to make a couple generalizations, or I guess declarations of generalizations and disclaimers. First of all, Navient is a private loan servicer, correct?
Yes.
And number two, we don't know that they told her this, other than that this is what she told us that they told her.
Yes. I mean, and this is a situation that's not uncommon.
Okay, right.
So let's not just say that this is, Navient. Like, this is not just them doing something. This happens to a lot of people across the board.
So the unfortunate nature of making income-based repayment, which in the last several years, anecdotally, Phil, I would say has become some sort of savior for people with student loans, or what seems like a savior for student loans, because they allow people to stay current despite the fact that financially they're not finding themselves in a better place.
Right. And really, income-based repayment, for me, makes a lot of sense, especially for those that are going to go into public service jobs, the nonprofit jobs, those types of things, because it can be tethered to public service loan forgiveness. And so those people that are making those income-based repayments will have the opportunity to have their loans forgiven after 10 years, assuming they're on that public service loan forgiveness. But the issue here is that this person's dealing with a private loan, or we assume a private loan, and so therefore they wouldn't be eligible for this.
You know, the public service student loan forgiveness thing is kind of a cool thing, but frankly, if my kid were dealing with that right now, I wouldn't put him that direction because it just feels like that program has a chance of going away, you know?
It's definitely a risky proposition. The hope is that even if it were to go away, that people would still be grandfathered into it or grandmothered in, as we kind of just.
You're clever.
You know, I'm bringing it back. Look at that.
So the question was, what advice do we have for? And you and I discussed this earlier. I feel like, and this sounds like obvious advice, and she's not, I mean, and Megan, thank you for emailing, by the way. You're not going to like this advice, but at least we know this. I think the only conceivable thing she can do, Phil, is to increase her income and pay more. And by increase her income, we mean what you and I say a lot.
The old side hustle.
Yeah, we need her to get a second job, which is, and like, Megan, I know you're listening to this right now because we're sending you the audio, but I know you're listening to this and you're thinking, boy, thanks, glad I emailed you. And we're saying it in a realistic sense that is this. She didn't say what the amount of student loans she has. I mean, maybe she's went from $4,000 in student loans to $7,000. Was that Bernie?
Dogs. That was Bernie. That's him letting me know that people are inside my office.
Oh my gosh, guard dog. So I would say this, Phil, that, I mean, maybe she went from $70,000 in loans to $90,000 in loans. So us saying to get a second job so you can make the right payment on your student loans, if it's those high amounts in the tens of thousands, it seems like really bad advice.
Yeah. I mean, this is a tough situation. I think that's what it boils down to. And, yeah, I don't think Megan's necessarily going to like this advice because she probably knows the answer to this, and she wants to see if there's another way to do it. The only thing I can see, you know, unless there's some information we're missing here, unless somehow she has a public loan that's allowed her to get into the situation, you know, she's pretty much exhausted all the options she can, and it's just increase income.
I mean, could she do some consolidation? But I mean, that's going to help with the interest rate. But based on the fact that she's doing income-based repayment, her payment would go up significantly, and that's a payment that we don't believe she can afford.
Yeah, and I mean, even if she potentially puts it in consolidation, she would have to have more than one loan that amounted to
True.
this. But we don't know whether or not, if she consolidated, if she would be eligible for an income-based repayment. Like, we don't even know if the payment would be in her budget at that point. So it's a really, really tough thing to be able to do that. Like, there are so many circumstances that would have to play out right for her to get her to a point where the amount of payment that she would make would actually decrease her premium. It's a tough situation.
And for the last minute of the segment, I'm going to talk past Megan and to the people that are not Megan listening to this, that, Phil, this is why every single day you and the people you work with and when we work together, we try to make sure students, when they borrow with a plan to pay back. It's because that assumption that you'll figure it out is what can get you in this horrible jam that Megan happens to be in.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, this is the reason why my office, other offices around the country, higher ed institutions exist, is because there's just a lot of information here that nobody was ever taught, and I assume that everything that Megan is doing here is based on, you know, what she thought was the best move for her. And that's not like, you know, I think a lot of people, when they see people make poor financial decisions, they just assume that they're not smart about these things, that they're not making the best choices out of just, for some reason, this person decided this is what was best for them. And a lot of times, it's just done out of ignorance. It's done out of, you know, recommendations from family and all of that. So we try and put the knowledge in students' heads to prevent this kind of situation from happening in the future. And unfortunately, we didn't exist before then to help people out like Megan.
Well, Phil, I'm out of time. I mismanaged my time. So thank you for your time. Phil Schuman, Director of Financial Literacy, Indiana University. Buddy, we'll talk to you again. I'm heading to the break. Coming up after the break, more of the Pete the Planner Show here on the Pete the Planner Radio Network.